Did you know just 100 companies have been responsible for over 70% of global carbon emissions since 1988? That's right. Climate change isn't just about individual choices, it's about power, policy, and how carbon is regulated in our world. Well, today, I'm going to explain the proposed solution of a carbon market. But what exactly are carbon markets? Everyone has pretty much heard of the large problem facing our world for an extended period of time: climate change and global warming. Our world is heating up, and if we don't do something fast, it could end very poorly for us. According to the 2023 Global Climate Report from NOAA, National Centers for Environmental Information, every month of 2023 ranked among the seven warmest for that month, and the months in the second half of the year were each their hottest on record. In July, August, and September, global temperatures were more than 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit above the long term average, which is the first time in NOAA's record any month has breached that threshold. So the government is trying to find a solution to solve this problem. So, what's the fix? Carbon markets. At the heart of most carbon markets is a system called cap and trade. Here's how it works: the government sets a cap or limit on total greenhouse gas emissions. Companies are given must buy permits that allow them to emit a certain amount of carbon into the air. If a company cuts its emissions and doesn't use all its permits, it can sell the extra to another company that's going over its limit. This creates a financial incentive to pollute less, since reducing emissions can save money or even make money. But critics argue that the system only works if the cap is strict and the permits are fairly distributed. So you're probably thinking that they're just an economic tool for the government or another ploy, right? Well, not exactly. According to the article, Making Things the Same: Gases, Emission Rights, and the Politics of Carbon Markets, McKenzie argues that carbon markets aren't just economic tools, they are deeply political and technical constructs. In short, carbon markets are engineered systems. They don't just reflect natural market forces, they are built by people making complex decisions about measurement, rules, and enforcement. As McKenzie argues, carbon markets are not neutral. They are shaped by the political and technical decisions made during their design, such as how emissions are measured and which actors are given more flexibility. So they are not just things that are discovered. They are designed by the governing body overseeing an area. McKinsey shows that scientists, economists, and regulators decide what counts as a valid emission, how emissions are measured, and who gets free permits. These technical choices are also political. Sometimes companies that had polluted the most actually got rewarded. So rule setting isn't just logistics. It's about power, and it shapes who wins and who loses in the system. For example, let's take the European Union's emissions trading scheme. To create this market, policymakers had to define what a ton of CO2 actually meant. That meant converting different gases into CO2 equivalents and building systems to measure and verify emissions. At first, the EU gave out permits for free to big polluters based on past emissions, a political compromise that actually rewarded heavy polluters in the past. And when too many permits were issued, prices crashed, making the market less effective than originally planned. Mackenzie's point: carbon markets are shaped by the rules we set, and those rules are never neutral. Let's take a step into the political dimensions surrounding carbon markets. When we think about carbon markets, it's easy to focus on the economics, but there's a lot more happening behind the scenes. These markets are shaped by politics at every level: who sets the emissions caps, and who decides how permits are distributed. These are political choices influenced by governments, industries, and lobbyists. Wealthy nations often have more leverage in shaping the rules, while developing countries may have less of a say, despite facing the worst effects of climate change. This dynamic plays out in the corporate world too. Large corporations typically have more resources to influence policy, navigate regulations, or even lobby for favorable terms, like free permits or looser restrictions. Smaller businesses, on the other hand, often lack that influence and face higher relative costs to comply. So while carbon markets aim to level the playing field environmentally, they can actually reinforce existing economic inequalities. In the end, Carbon markets aren't just technical solutions, they reflect real world power dynamics where decisions are made not just by scientists, but by people with institutions with competing interests. So, what can we take away from all of this? Carbon markets are often seen as technical fixes to a global crisis, but as we've seen, they're also deeply political. The rules that shape them decide not just how emissions are reduced, but who benefits and who does not. Mackenzie reminds us these systems aren't neutral, they're designed, and that design reflects power, priorities, and compromise. If we want carbon markets to work, really work, we need transparency, accountability, and strong public voices shaping the rules, not just corporate interest. Because fighting climate change isn't just about science, it's about justice. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new about carbon markets.